Hey, welcome back to my basement. This is Jeremiah Wolf, and today is September 9th. It's a Wednesday, and a couple hours ago I took for the first time and passed the CompTIA, however you say it, Linux Plus exam, XK0-004, the current Linux Plus exam. So I just wanted to share my thoughts on it, what I used to study, that kind of stuff, and maybe it'll help you out. A couple of things, just let me give you a little bit of background. I don't normally talk about Linux on this channel. I don't normally talk about CompTIA, so this might be your new to my channel. Um, just real quick, I have been out of IT for many years. I started in IT technically back in 1995 in sales, if you could call that being part of IT, being in sales. Um, and then kind of progressed from there. I got my MCSE, and then eventually I became a senior systems engineer with my MCSE, NT4, MCSE 2000. I wanted to move into networking, so I got my CCNA. Then I got my CCNP, CCDP, Design Professional, CCSP, Security Professional from Cisco. And I was a senior network engineer at a couple different companies. And then in 2013, I left IT altogether. I started a business, sort of pursuing a passion of mine. And I've been doing that for the past 7.5 years. And there has been some recent changes in my situation. We have a baby on the way, which will be here in another couple of months. And looking at the finances and whatever, the truth is I've never made as much money as I used to in IT with my own business, and I feel like while I could maybe get there one day, it's been a slog, and I don't see myself kind of making the money that I want to be making anytime soon. It makes more sense to get back into IT, where we have a lot of more stability for my family with this baby on the way. My wife and I are both a little bit older. We're in our 40s, so there's a lot of risks with having a baby at this age, for her. When it comes to health insurance and stability, income stability, and all these things, it seems like it's a good time to go back into IT. So with such a huge break, 7.5 or 8 years that I've been out of the business, it kind of made sense for me to get some certifications, to get it on my resume, kind of make my resume look good, and then get back out there. So I am actually working toward my CCIE, my Cisco Certified Internetworking Expert. And thus far, I have recertified as a Cisco Certified Network Associate, CCNA, and as a CCNP, Network Professional in Enterprise with a specialization in routing and switching. So that's where I am right now. So since I've been back at this since May, mid-April is when I started studying again. Today was my fourth test. So in 5 months, a little less than 5 months, I've taken 4 tests. And the reason I'm doing the Linux Plus is not because I have any particular interest in Linux or that I want to be a Linux administrator, but the reality is that in today's modern world, so much runs on Linux. And Cisco itself is, embracing more and more Linux, and we live in a world now where you see a lot of virtual appliances, that are running on a VM or running on Linux, and so it's where you need to be. You need to know Linux in today's world. So I said, well, hey, if I got to learn it anyway, I might as well get a certification to slap on the resume and just make it look a little good. So I just went with CompTIA Linux Plus. It's one test, and it's well known. So that's what I went with. So let's take a look, see how we did here. Is this the one I want? This one. Okay, so CompTIA Linux Plus, and let's see here. So the passing score is 720. And how do we do? Where's my pen at? So look, so I got 866 out of required 720. This is really weird. So if you look at, let's let's do this. So here's my score, 866. A passing score 720, but the range is 100 to 900. So it's really hard to tell. Like with Cisco exams, your score is pretty close to a percentage. So if I got an 866 on a Cisco exam, that would be like an 86.6%, roughly. But between 100 and 900, I'm not sure how to interpret that. So I think I did okay if the maximum score is 900. So I think I did okay. But then again, it also says that I missed questions and in all this here. So I don't know, but I passed it, and I just want to share my thoughts with it and tell you how I studied. So I started studying for this in right at the end of July. So it's been almost exactly 6 weeks that I studied for this exam. I think it's also worth saying that first off, I haven't touched a Linux system in years. And even when I did, I have, it was at the level of a basic user, like I just would log on to do a few very specific tasks. I have never administered a Linux box. I've never installed a Linux box. I've just never had any interest, to be frank, and I'll share with some of those as a little bit later in the video my reasons why I've just never really cared about Linux. But I haven't, it's not a dig. It just hasn't interested me. And when you only have so much mental bandwidth to go with, I just never really chose to go with Linux. So I was kind of coming into this with borderline zero real knowledge, zero practical knowledge. Again, I knew how to like ls and cd, and I used to be okay with VI. Like I used to be able to get around and was comfortable with VI, but I couldn't remember anything honestly when I got back into it. So let's talk about what I used to study. So the first thing is obviously books. Oh, let me clear the. The first thing is books, and let's come back over here. And so here's the first book that I picked up. And, beep, sorry. No, that's not what I wanted. Anywho. Okay, there we go. So here's the first book that I picked up. The McGraw Hill Linux Plus book. And I'm just going to tell you, this book is a flaming pile of dung. It is the worst book I have ever tried to study from. It's garbage. This book, do not buy this book. Don't waste your time. The reviews on Amazon were mostly positive, and I don't understand how. There are so many errors in this book. First off, you think, who knows how to make textbooks? Well, McGraw Hill should know how to make textbooks. It's what they do. It's their only job is to make textbooks, as far as I know. And this is just, the layout of it is horrible. The order that they're teaching you things, like if you have several years of Linux experience, you're already a Linux administrator at maybe like a tier 2 kind of level, so like a mid-level administrator, and you just need to review, then maybe I could recommend this book if you're already have been exposed to all the concepts. But even then, I can't really recommend it because there are so many errors that basically when I sat down, I read about a third of this book. And when I sat down to read this book, I basically had to have my tablet with me. And I had to constantly be looking stuff up because I'd be reading, I'm like, that doesn't make sense. And then I'd look it up and, oh, sure enough, it's not how it's not how it's done. There'd be so many typos, so many errors. And you're talking about a command line operating system here, right? Where every little tick and dash and capital versus lowercase, that all matters. It all makes a difference. A bracket versus a curly brace, it matters. And whoever edited this book had no idea. Like, there was the one thing that I remember, because it's been a few weeks since I looked at this book, but the one thing I remember was there was a list, and whoever was editing thought that the dash letter, as a command switch or command option, I don't know what you call it, I call them switches, thought it was a bullet point. It wasn't supposed to be a bullet point. It was actually the dash. You needed the dash. And so they screwed it up. That's just one example. This is it's a wretched. I just can't say enough bad about this book. It's just, the sad thing was, because I started with this book, it got me off on such a negative mind space. Like, going into this, I really didn't, it's one of those things where I love networking. I'm interested in networking, like network, OSPF, EIGRP, BGP, layer 2 stuff. Like, all that stuff can be hard. It can be complex. It can be difficult, but I enjoy it. I really wasn't looking forward to the Linux. Like, it's not something that I'm passionate about, that I particularly enjoy. So already I wasn't like geeked up and excited about it. But then to start reading this book and it just to be so bad, it really kind of got me off on the wrong foot. So that was the first book that I attempted to read. And then I tried this book. And, okay, this was like, for me, this was like coming home. So if you're not aware, so this is from Pearson. You're probably familiar with Pearson because of, that's who does the tests, right? Pearson VUE does the tests. And Pearson Publishing is also known as Cisco Press. So many years ago, when Cisco decided to start publishing their own books, they partnered with Pearson. I guess I never actually knew this until I always thought it was an independent company. I had no idea that it was Pearson. I guess I just never bothered to look. But Cisco Press is Pearson. So I have read dozens and dozens of Cisco Press books, and so the layout is very familiar to me. It's definitely geared toward learning. It is written in a way that is geared toward learning, and that remains true for this book. All the familiar conventions were there, the way they write things, the way they highlight things, the pre-chapter quiz, the post-chapter quiz, everything was there. And so for me, this book was infinitely better. I mean, just infinitely better than this book. Go with the Pearson book. Or if there's maybe there's a better one out there. I don't know. This might not be the best book. But after my experience with this one, I felt comfortable getting the Pearson book. And once I got it and was reading through it, I was very glad with my choice. This really changed things for me. Everything just made so much more sense. Way, way better. Okay, so I read the books, and then I have a CBT Nuggets subscription. So I wanted to, also do that, the CBT Nuggets. So let's take a look over here. So CBT Nuggets has a 16-hour course, and all right, I'm going to tell you right now, I have enjoyed my CBT Nuggets experience so far. I've used them for 2 Cisco tests, the Cisco Encore test and the NRC exam. And I have found the material to be pretty good, definitely helpful. And overall, my experience with CBT Nuggets has been positive. And I think I had a subscription now for like 4 months. However, I really didn't care for this. Now, again, I'm going to be, just be upfront. I have some negative biases towards Linux in general, for whatever reason. Well, there are reasons, and I'll explain it. But so maybe that's part of it. But the truth is, I watched these videos, and while the trainer was good, the trainer is this Sean Powers guy. Look, he's good. He's energetic. He's obviously excited. He, based on things that he has said in the course, he has been doing Linux for many years, and it is, as far as I can tell, based on what he said, it is his primary career path as a Linux system administrator, which he has done for various companies or organizations. So he knows what he's doing. He has real world experience, but that's kind of what came through in this a lot more, rather than like watching one of these videos and walking away and saying, okay, I understand that as someone who is new to this. Instead, I kept walking away thinking, wow, he really convinced me that he knows what he's doing, but he hasn't helped me to know what I'm doing, if that makes sense. A lot of it was like, there's this one example. I don't even remember what the command was. I think it was netstat. We're talking about netstat. And he keeps talking about how he likes to use the options -tuna, -tuna. And so, it's easy to remember. Obviously, I remember it, -tuna. But I don't know why. I can't tell you why he did that. He never went through and said, well, I use this switch for that, I use this switch for that, and altogether does that. And let's compare it to some other choices. And this is why I think that this is the best set of options to use. Like, it was never like that. It was just like, brr, brr, okay, there's a command, brr, okay, there's the output, moving on, brr, okay, now to the next thing. And you're like, whoa, I didn't feel like I was learning. I felt like I was watching someone type Linux commands. So I feel bad because I do like CBT Nuggets. The price is great. The organization seems good. The people seem genuinely like really good people who really want to help, other people in their career. But I just got very, very little out of this. So basically, I would read the book. This is kind of my MO. I like to read the book and then watch the associated videos as a kind of a way to... so I read the book, one day, and then I watch the videos the next day. And I kind of use that as a way to sort of reinforce what I'm learning. And, I got a little bit out of it, but... if I were to do this again, I would have just skipped this altogether. The other thing that I'm being very negative about it, but I'm not going to bother looking for it. But in a couple of the other courses I did with CBT Nuggets, they had fantastic labs, just fantastic labs. And you actually, you can remote into their lab server system thing, and, you're on the command line of a Cisco device, and you have multiple devices, and you can ping, and there's a workstation you connect to test things. So really great labs. And for the NRC exam, the last exam I did, there was labs for almost every single one of these subject points, whatever you call them. However, I think for this entire course, there's maybe 5 labs tops. There's also several videos where he's talking as if you're supposed to be doing a lab, but there is no lab. Like, it was never set up. It's not listed in the software, in the interface here. So I think there's a few labs that maybe he had intended to do that just never got done. But even the labs that he does do, like, they're just weak. They're just weak. It's just a lot of like, here's exactly what to type. Okay, that worked. Now play around. And for someone who's learning, it's like just play around doesn't really help. Like, yes, that is a valid way of learning. But at the same time, it's like, well, before we do the play around, like, maybe you should actually teach us a little bit more. Maybe we should go through and explain some of the differences. Like, let's compare the output with this set of options versus that set of options. Let's talk about why you would use one command over another. Like, actually teach instead of just like, here's a command, okay, go play around. Like, well, that wasn't helpful. So while I love CBT Nuggets in general, in this instance, I got nothing out of it. Okay, so that was sort of the instruction portion. I had the books, I had the videos. Now I wanted to do some labs, and I started looking around, and I was really struggling to find labs to do. I just couldn't find anything good. So I first came across this book here. So what I did was I bought this book, 101 Labs, CompTIA Linux Plus. It's supposed to be for the newest version of the exam. And it's exactly what it says. It's 101 labs. And so what I did was I set up a couple of VMs just running on my Windows box. And they actually, they have a specific, I think they recommend Ubuntu. I forget. And then what I did was I bought the Kindle version. So on one monitor, I had the Kindle version of that book opened up. And on the other monitor, I had the VM. And I just kind of went through the labs. But after about, so it's 101 labs, I did about 15 of them. And I was just very disappointed. Just very disappointed again. This is going to be a recurring theme. If you're looking to get all super upbeat, we'll get there. But this isn't it just yet. So this book, man, just didn't do it for me. Again, it was weird because they would say, okay, here's the lab, type out this command. And he would use these like really long commands with all these switches and stuff. And you're like, I'm not sure what's going on. And yes, I could have opened up the man pages and dissected everything. But I feel like, I don't know. I feel like that's asking a bit like, tell me why you're doing it that way. A lot of the labs, again, were just like, years ago, it's been so long, but back in the earlier part of my career, a few times, not often because it was always very expensive, but a few times I got to go to some classes, actual, real classes. And I think it was like global knowledge, global something. Anyway, I forget. So these were like $3,000 to $5,000 classes. They were usually a week long. I'd usually have to travel. So the company's paying for hotel, paying for meals, paying for a rental car, oftentimes, and then on top of the class. So for the company, this was an expensive investment. Maybe $7,000, $8,000. So I'd go to this class, and you'd sit to the classroom portion, and then it came to the labs, and they'd have these nice spiral-bound lab workbooks. And you would the last class that I remember was a Cisco call manager class that I did, and so it's relatively complex stuff, setting up all these the phone system and call manager and all the associated stuff. And this was 12, 13 years ago, and I remember flipping through the lab book as we're doing it, and it's just like step 1, do this, step 2, do this, it was literally like click here, click there, type this, now click here, hit enter, type this, click here. And when you get to the end, you're like, okay, yes, I've technically done this stuff, but don't ask me to do it again. I don't know anything. And that's kind of the feeling that I was getting with this this book here was like, yes, I was doing things, but I wasn't learning anything at all. And the other thing was, I think the final straw was I did a lab. I followed it exactly, and it actually broke my VM. I had to reset the VM. I think I had to reinstall. No, I figured out how to fix it. But it was like, if you haven't even, I'm using the exact software release that they told me to. I did the exact commands that they told me to, and it didn't work. And not only did it not work, it actually prevented my VM from booting. So at that point I was like, I'm done with this. I contacted Amazon and got a refund, which by the way was an interesting process because it was a Kindle book. I've never asked for a refund on a Kindle book, and I had to talk to like 4 different people before they could figure out. Apparently it's just not a normal thing. I don't know, but they didn't give me a hard time about it. They just kept saying, I'm gonna have to transfer you. It was all chat. It's all chat. Okay, so that was that. Well, I still needed some labs, so I went to my old standby that I love. I always use their practice tests whenever possible. They're just fantastic. I can just never say enough good stuff about Boson. Well, they have this practice test. It's not practice test, labs. It's $100. It ain't cheap, so $100. But I went ahead and did it. And let's just take a look at it here. Hopefully it doesn't show anything because I really don't want to. Actually, did it? Okay, good. I was afraid that it was showing like my license key or something. So there's like 60 labs here. Obviously, I didn't finish the last couple of them. And these are really good. So it starts off, it explains what you're doing, what you're going to get out of it, how long it should take. It gives you the topology, although this is the exact same for every single lab. It's the exact same topology. You have 3 virtual machines. You have a CentOS machine, an Ubuntu machine, and then a Windows machine that acts as various roles depending on the lab. And then you get into the actual lab. It does walk you through step by step, but what I really love about this was it actually gives you explanations, not for everything. They're very clear. It says we're not going to teach you any theory. But even so, though they say that, they do explain a lot of why are we doing it this way? Why are we doing it that way? Now, there are some labs where it's just like, okay, type this command -U. Now type this command -F. Now this command -E. I don't know, whatever. But they never explain why you're doing that. They don't. So it's it's kind of up to you to like try to find the differences and look at the man pages. So it wasn't perfect, like as far as an instructional tool, but so much better than the that 101 Labs thing. So so as you can see, you get into it's still booting up here. It's normally actually quite a bit quicker. I don't know what's taking so long. It must be a lot of people using it today or something. But anyway, so you get into either the CentOS or the Ubuntu machine. Maybe they're having some kind of problem. I think there was one time I had a problem with it, and I just had to like reset the entire thing. There it goes. And it worked, but yeah, I don't know what's going on here. Just slow, I guess. Oh, there it goes. So, you just get on there and you can do what you need to do. Excellent tool. As always, Boson. Now, this is actually, I think Boson is like reselling this. I don't think they actually did this. And if you look at, if you come back here, because Boson is only selling, as far as I could tell, specifically for the Linux Plus. But if you look at the exam objectives, it also has the exam objectives for the LPI exams. So there's a lot of overlap. So yeah, anyway, I would say personally, I probably learned just as much, if not more, from these labs as I did from this book. And again, the videos kind of reinforce some things, but I didn't really learn a whole lot from the videos. I really, really like these labs. I highly recommend it. If you already have experience and you just want to go through the book and practice what you see in the book, and you don't really need a structured lab, then do that. But if you're like me, you don't have a lot of experience, or if you're like me, you have zero experience, and you really need someone to tell you what to practice, this tool was fantastic. So let's log out of there. Okay, so at this point, I've read one and a third books. I've done a 16-hour course. I've done some practice labs, and it's clear to me that I'm still lacking. I don't have what I need, and what I really want is some practice tests. And because the practice test, it's a different thing than just reading a book. They're reading the book, they're giving you all kinds of information. And yes, you could take notes and reread the book, and you're going to kind of cement some more of that information. But it's not the same as being asked questions. It's a different mindset. It's a different way of thinking about things. And I really feel it's important for a lot of these things to have that practice test. So I got to looking, and my favorite, as I've said before, is Boson. I love Boson practice exams. And unfortunately for CompTIA, they have no Linux. So I was kind of like, dang, what am I going to do? So I start looking around, and I'm looking for practice tests, searching on Google. There's some on Udemy that just look kind of cheesy. There's like a book or two on Amazon that didn't get good reviews. I'm not having any luck. So I'm like, okay, let's go to CompTIA let's look, let's see what they have. They have like an official thing, and here it is. So CompTIA, here's their Linux Plus exam prep bundles. You can get the voucher for $329. You can get the basic bundle, excuse me, for $450. Or you can get the exam prep bundle for $600. Whew. But here's the thing. The only one that comes with the practice. Now here's the thing. When I saw this, I thought CompTIA CertMaster practice. I thought practice test. It's a test. If you're doing practice, it must be a practice test. Well, kind of. And this was a hard pill to swallow at $600. I mean, that's just a lot of money. Now, what you get the exam voucher, and that voucher comes with a retake. So if you fail, you get to retake it. Ebook, whatever, couldn't care less. But this is what I wanted, the CertMaster practice. So I bought it. I spent $600 on this thing. And, well, we'll come back to that. So here it is. This is their CertMaster thing. As you can tell, oh, you can't see it. It's actually provided by Amplifier. So again, I don't think this is, I don't know how, if CompTIA subcontracted this out or what. But you have these, thank you. So you have each of the primary points of focus, whatever it's called, for the exam. And then you have all the objectives, exam objectives are covered. And then you go to each one, and let's see what we can see. And it will give you questions. A lot of questions. So here's 59 questions just for this one little area of the exam objectives. So all told, I think it's like 700 or 800 questions total. At first, I was really excited. I thought, oh, fantastic. But then I started going through. Now, I did every single one of these questions. I did the practice test. I don't know why it doesn't show it. I did every single one of these questions. And it's kind of a nice system because basically the way it works is it asks you the question. If you get it right, you move on. If you get it wrong, it'll work it back into the subset of questions. I think you have to get everything right. If you've got it wrong once, you have to answer it right 2 or 3 times before it'll finally kind of fall out of the rotation. So make sure that you have gotten everything right. And at first I was feeling pretty good about this CompTIA practice thing. But then the more I did it, what I started to see is that, one, a lot of the questions were not wrong, but incomplete or inaccurate. And what I started to realize was that, at least for the vast majority of these exam objectives and related questions, what it was it looked like they had hired an intern and they said, here's the book, just flip through the book and make questions about this chapter. Because it was like, it would like quote, which was clearly part of a textbook, and then you were supposed to pick the right answer. And because of that, a lot of things were out of context and were like, well, yes, technically that's true, but it's actually a lot more complex than that. So it's not really the best. Ultimately, after doing almost 800 questions, I did the practice test, and these, I'm sorry, I'm not clicking on it. I'm not showing it. After doing the practice test, all 800 of these questions, they didn't help. They didn't help at all. I was so angry. It was such a huge waste of time. Like, just a giant waste. Giant fucking waste. I was so annoyed. So annoyed with this whole thing. Well, at this point, I'm like, okay, the test is coming up. I think I'd already scheduled at this point. I need a better practice test. I need something that's actually going to test me, not just give me like this. These were just like stupid little trivia questions that were, I mean, it was like most of it was super easy, especially if you've seen it once, it's just super easy and was nothing like the level of the questions that were in this practice test. Once I did this practice test, I'm like, oh, okay, I am not prepared. Not prepared. Well, I got like a 78%. I didn't pass the practice test, just barely didn't pass it. But my thing is with these vendor provided practice tests, they are almost always significantly easier than the real test. So in my mind, if I just barely failed this, I'm going to really fail the real test. I need to like hardcore pass the practice test, like almost 100% score to even be, to get a decent score on the test. That's just been my experience with the dozens and dozens of industry tests that I've taken over the past 20 years. So I start looking for another practice test. And again, I'm just finding all these things. I want to, as much as possible, avoid a brain dump. I do not want test questions. I think that's unethical. I think it's immoral. I think it's wrong. I was having such a hard time finding actual, someone who sat down and made a practice test. So finally, what I found was this test prep training. This is not legit. So it's $16, 585 questions, and there's very little overlap in these questions. So it's 585 mostly unique questions, man, I don't. It was so much better than this stuff, like way better. A lot of them, I would say 20% of them were wrong. They had the wrong answer. And here's the thing. They stole these questions. I'll tell you right now, they did not write these questions, which, for $16, I kind of suspected that going into it, but I just didn't have a choice. Like, I could not find anything else. I wanted a good set of questions. Like, I saw lots of websites were selling test questions, like 30 test questions for $30. It's like, no, I'm not buying that. So this was one of the better study tools that I found, just because it was just such a huge number of questions. And basically what I had to do, because so many of these, the correct answer was wrong in their software, basically I had a VM opened and a web browser, and for every question, I would pick what I thought the answer was, and then I would go research it. I would either try the command on the command line, or I would go read the man page, or look for an explanation online. And so because of that, it took me, a week and a half to get through these questions. Like, it was fucking brutal. I only had time to look at every question once. I usually like to go back and review, but there was not enough time because it was such a huge manual process. I couldn't trust any of the answers that they gave. So I had to go out and, find all the answers on my own. So because of that, it was a good study tool. However, like, they've obviously stolen these questions. Now, in the past, I have bought practice tests that once you get into it, based on like some of the, like, they're like, XYZ company is doing this and you need to do that. So what's the proper answer? Once you're like, oh shoot, like, they don't change the XYZ company and it tells you who actually wrote the question, basically. Like, so in the past I have bought these kind of things and then went and, bought it from the real company, because I want the people who are actually putting forth the effort to get my money. But there was no such thing. I don't know where they got these questions from. I will tell you that there were a couple in here that were eerily close to things I saw on the actual exam. But I wouldn't call this a brain dump, because it wasn't like, it was just a couple of questions out of 585 that were very similar to what was on the exam. But there was nothing where there was exact. So I don't think this was like a brain dump. I don't know where they got the questions from. So I don't know. Like, I feel bad because obviously they are profiting off of, theft of someone else's hard work. But I didn't feel like I couldn't find the actual thing. I don't know what to do. Excuse me. Let me get a cough here. Oh, I muted me. I didn't mute you. Sorry for coughing in your in your ear. Wrong button. Okay, so let's go through the breakdown here. What do we got? We got a pen. We got that. We'll come over to white. Okay, so let's take a look at it. Books, videos, labs, practice test, and then I don't know how to kind of bundle in that CompTIA bundle, so I'm just going to call it the CompTIA. Oops. So because that's the actual exam voucher and their practice test piece of garbage. So books, I spent $103. Videos was 1 month subscription of CBT Nuggets at $63. The labs, not just the Boson Labs, not that lab book. I included that in the books. It was $100. The practice test was $16, and then the CompTIA was $600 for a grand total of $882 that I spent. Now, let me be real clear. I have been a hiring manager many times. I have managed throughout my career several teams of guys, engineers, from help desk up to senior, more senior level engineers. And I have never given any weight to someone with a CompTIA certification. I am not impressed. I can also say that I think I am in the minority there. People who basically what happens is the CompTIA certification is going to make sure that HR sees your resume and passes it on to the hiring manager. So with that on your resume, you're more likely to get passed on to the person. The final person probably isn't going to be too impressed by it. That's just a reality because, I had my A+. I got my A+ back in like 90, I think it was like 99. 1999, I got my A+ certification. And this is how I studied for the A+. I went and got a book. This was back in the day, so we actually went to the store and bought books. I went and bought a book that was no bigger than this. It was the smallest book I could find. I skimmed it the night before my exam. I skimmed it. I went in the parking lot of the exam. I memorized very quickly the IRQs and the DMA channel numbers. I walked in the exam, and back then it was a hardware exam and a software exam. I took both exams back to back, passed them, walked out, had my A+. The only reason I did it was because my employer required it, and the only reason my employer required it was because this whole IT certification thing was relatively new, and they just didn't know any better. But there's still people that require these sorts of certifications. So I having taken this exam, having passed this exam and done okay on it, I got it 866 with out of a maximum of 900, so I did okay, if not pretty good. I don't know. I do not feel even remotely qualified for even a junior level Linux administrator position. The problem with this test is that it is so broad. There are so many. They want you to basically know something about just about everything you'd ever have to do as a Linux administrator. So rather than saying, okay, if you're a Linux administrator, you need to know all this, and you need to know all this deep. So this is a true Linux administrator, all this knowledge. Well, rather than saying, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on this, and we're going to go like half deep. So a subset of skills, the things that everybody really needs to know, we're going to go, a little deep, not all the way, a little deep. So you go into a job, you can sit down and you can do all the tasks that a junior level administrator is going to have to do. Rather than doing that approach, which would actually make you a valuable employee, they said, no, we want you to know all the same things that a more senior administrator would want to know, but instead of knowing it all this much, we just need you to know it this much. So all of those things, and you don't know any of them with any real depth. So this test is, in my opinion, a test on your ability to memorize commands and memorize directories. That is it. You do not, in my opinion, this does not prepare you for a job as a Linux administrator. This prepares you to demonstrate that you have the ability to memorize things. It angers me because even now, after passing this exam, I don't feel comfortable sitting down in front of a Linux machine and doing very many things. One of the things that frustrates me is, let's say you're getting a job as a Linux administrator. Let's say you're setting up a training program for a Linux administrator. And what do you want to do? You want to pick the top skills that you're going to need, and you want to drill those into someone, teach them. You want them to walk away understanding the how and the why. How does it work? Why does it work? How do you troubleshoot it? Why do you use these commands versus those commands? That's what you want someone to know. That's hard to, you can't do that with the hugely broad number of topics in this book. The other thing is, what was I going to say? That'll come back to me in a second. So it frustrates me because I don't think this prepares anyone for a job. And I don't think that if you see this on someone's resume, which I'm going to put it on mine. So if you're a potential employer and you found this video of mine or something, like, what, it is what it is. But if you're an employer and you see this doesn't mean that they have the ability to sit down and do stuff on your Linux machines. It means that they had the ability to memorize a crap ton of commands and a crap ton of directories. That's all this test is just memorization of commands and directories. It's very little true understanding, very little true knowledge. It is my opinion that at least for this exam, and I've had this opinion for a long time about CompTIA, so this kind of reinforced that opinion, but it is my opinion that CompTIA, contrary to how they appear as a company that is there to train people, to certify people, to prepare them for entry-level positions. No. Based on my experience with this, they are a company that is designed to get you to buy more training material. If you read their book, you'd be like, oh crap, I don't know enough. That's why you're going to get that bundle. That's why they get that $600 bundle with all those pointless questions. And then why do they give you the exam, the retake voucher? What other testing company or what other certification program gives you a retake voucher that's telling you, oh, there's a pretty good chance you're going to fail? They do that because they know that you're going to go take it, you're going to fail, and then you're going to have to buy more training material. And their training material is so subpar that so I spent $882 on this exam, way more than I spent on any of the Cisco certifications that I have. Way more. So it makes me angry because I feel like they're taking advantage of people. It reminds me of ITT Technical Institute. We used to have an ITT that was literally down the block, like down the street from this company I used to work for. And because we were a technology company and we were so close to ITT, we had some people to go participate in their job fairs or whatever. And we definitely hired people from ITT for entry level positions. But when someone came from ITT, one, that wasn't what I was doing. They would get in the help desk or one of our other departments. So I never hired anyone from ITT because I was in engineering. We didn't hire entry level people. But the thing that drove me nuts was these people would come from ITT with between $30 and sometimes like $40,000 of debt and they would have the skill set of someone who had been practicing and reading in their own spare time for about 6 months. If I had someone who had an interest in computers and had been reading some books and, practicing some stuff on their computer in their spare time for the past 6 months, they would have the same skill set as someone coming from ITT with $30,000 in debt and this, diploma. And I'm sorry if you've attended ITT. There are people for whom ITT was a godsend, but the vast majority of people that I worked with from there, it was the only thing they got from that was debt. Everything else they could have taught themselves in a matter of months. So that's kind of what I feel about this CompTIA. Like it's designed basically to separate you from your money in a way that is, it feels unethical. It's kind of gross. But maybe I'm completely wrong, and it's just that I just not a big fan of Linux, and so I got this huge chip on my shoulder. I'm willing to admit that all that might be true, but anyway. So those are all my thoughts on. Man, this video is so long. I wanted to talk about some of the things that were actually on the exam, just real quick. The types, lots of multiple choice questions. There was nothing where you had to type. There were like drag and drops where you had to like complete. They give you like this whole big list of commands, and you'd have to like pick the components to populate the commands. Other than that, it was just it was stuff that was in the book. It was just a lot of you really got to memorize all those directories and all the commands. Oh, the one thing I will say was I can't say it's about all of the questions regarding commands, but I can comfortably say the vast majority of the questions that involved commands where at first blush you're like, oh shit, I don't remember all the switches. I don't remember what -A or, I feel like you do definitely need to know the more common switches for the more common commands. But at the same time, for most of the questions where there were like long commands with like multiple commands and pipes and whatever and multiple switches, and you had 4 different options, usually there was something about each of the possible answers that gave it away as being false. Like the way that it was written, you just wasn't valid. There would be something that would invalidate it. And so at first blush, it would be intimidating because you think, oh, I don't know what all that means. But then when you actually look at it, you're like, oh, it can only be C because C is the only one that's actually written in a valid syntax for whatever reason. So as you're going through the exam, when you come across those, pause and read every one and compare them, and it'll usually pop out to you like, oh, that's why that one's wrong and that one's wrong and this is right. So other than that, there's really there's nothing that I can tell you like, oh, make sure you know this, make sure you know that. It was all over the place, which is my big complaint about this certification in general. It's all over the place. All right. Okay, man, once again, I was sure I could do this in like 20 minutes, and here we are at 53 minutes. I hope you stuck around and got something out of it. Thanks for watching. I'm Jeremiah. See you next time.